Hey, honey.
Yes, Barry?
Let's get out of here.
Where are we going?
Where do we always go?
Este ritmo de palmas, sin naturaleza, hasta encontrar la playa. Por eso grito al mundo, yo soy de Puerto Vallarta. Samba de Puerto Vallarta, noche de arrullo en el mar. Samba de Puerto Vallarta, noche.
Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to this episode of the Puerto Vallarta Travel Show. I am your host, Barry Kessler, and I'm just so happy to be introducing you to my favorite vacation destination. Maybe it's even yours. And if it's not, what's the matter with you? Come on, it's Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. That music that you're listening to, it's performed by Alberto Perez, and for those of you who have listened to my podcast, you know that Alberto Perez is the owner of the Lapa Lapa group of restaurants, and Lapa Lapa, as well as the El Dorado restaurant, are located on the south side, right down on the beach in Puerto Vallarta. And if you play your cards right, you can catch Alberto Perez singing and playing the Samba de Puerto Vallarta, just like I did the other night, while enjoying dinner under the stars, toes in the sand at the water's edge. It was so romantic. So Puerto Vallarta, you guys. You gotta go. Trust me on this one. Now today, I have a very special episode for you. I'm going to be taking you on a walk down the Malecon in Puerto Vallarta with Gary Thompson, the director of the Galeria Pacifico. But first, just a couple of updates and tips for all you Puerto Vallarta lovers out there. Once again, if you haven't already seen it, please get out there and check out my video about what to expect when you arrive at the Puerto Vallarta airport. You're going to find it at www.puertovallartatravelshow.com. It's going to be under episode 3 on my blog and podcast page. You'll also find it in the show notes from my latest podcast where I interview our friend JR and also those nice Canadians, John and Karen Raditz, over at the Salty Caesar restaurant down in the Emilio Zapata neighborhood of Puerto Vallarta. Anyway, check it out. Don't get caught in the shark tank, boys and girls. Just saying. Also, the ATM machines in the lobby of the Puerto Vallarta airport are just about to go online, but not quite done yet. Make sure that you bring some pesos with you, or you can still exchange money at the airport to cover your taxi and your hotel. I mean, your taxi to your hotel. It won't cover your hotel. Your taxi or your van to your hotel. So once you've done that, then you can get yourself to a bank, an affiliated ATM machine that's actually inside of a bank, and a bank machine. Don't go walking over and find some cashola machine out on a corner somewhere or out on the street. Make sure it's inside a bank, you guys. Now, for more information on exchanging money, go to episode 2 of the Puerto Vallarta Travel Show and listen or read those show notes. Once again, it's at www.puertovallartatravelshow.com. Okay, now let's get on with the show. Today we're going to be joining Gary Thompson, and Gary is the director of the Galeria Pacifico in downtown Puerto Vallarta, like I was saying earlier. And what Gary does is pretty cool. He gives walks. He gives like a tour. Okay, let's put that together. He does a walking tour of the sculptures that you find along the Malecon. Now, the Malecon, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the boardwalk that runs right along the beach in downtown Puerto Vallarta. It goes from downtown all the way into the south side of Puerto Vallarta. Now, Gary, during the high season, from I think it's like mid-November till the middle of April, he does these walks. They're free. And he starts at the north end of the Malecon at the Millennia. Beautiful, beautiful sculpture, bronze, absolutely remarkable. Anyway, he starts there, and that's located right there at the Hotel Rosita. And they set up little chairs for everybody to go and sit there. It's really great. Anyway, he works his way down south. He stops at each of the different pieces of art or collections of art and talks about them. The tour takes about 2 or 3 hours, more like 3 hours. And in the end, we end up at the Galeria Pacifico, where we're treated to something cool to drink, like a beer or a soda or some water. And then we get a chance to meet and hear from a local artist, Jim DeMetro, who told us about the bronze casting process and told us about his works. And you're going to find them not only on the Malecon, but they're all around Puerto Vallarta. And if you go to my show notes in this episode, you're going to see pictures that I took as well as information about all of the artists. Now, I got up in the morning, got myself ready, and I walked from my apartment because this starts at 9:30 in the morning. So I left it around 8, maybe 8:15. I walked down to, I was up in the El Cerro area, up around Liz and Dick's place, and I headed down to the Malecon. I stopped for breakfast at Rico Mac Taco and had a plate of chicken chilaquiles. And by the way, Rico Mac is a great place. It's a great, cheap little stop. You guys got to go there. Anyway, I went over to the Hotel Rosita, where there were, as I said, there were seats all set up there for a pretty large group that were assembled. And along with Gary was a man named Kevin Simpson, who is the owner of Peyote People Gallery and Collectica Gallery in Puerto Vallarta. And what Kevin did there was he told us about the symbols that were between the sculptures on the Malecon. Now, these symbols are actually in the concrete, in the sidewalk, built into the Malecon. They're made with pebbles, like stones. And you see them all over town. Well, Kevin told us the story and the meanings behind all of these different symbols. Now, leading off the walk, we were introduced to a man named Fernando Baños, and his artistic name is Mathis Lidice. Mathis, I got to get this right. Mathis Lidice. And you're going to hear Gary talk about him at the beginning of the walk. Now, this man told us all about the sculpture, and the sculpture is called the Millennia. And so let's join Gary Thompson and Kevin Simpson on the Malecon in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Indigenous work throughout Mexico. Kevin Simpson, owner of Peyote People Gallery and Collectica Gallery. And he's going to go along with us and explain these symbols in between sculptures. But right now he's going to give you just a brief overview on the tribes. So let's have a hand for Kevin Simpson, please.
Buenos dias. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Huichol, but they are a fascinating tribe. They live deep, deep up in the mountains above us. Some of the simple facts that make them interesting is that nobody touched a Huichol until 1722. That gave them 200 years of autonomy after the fall of the Aztecs. It was at that time that Franciscan missionaries penetrated the Sierra and traded little glass beads to them in the hopes of converting them. One of the other things that makes them interesting was the fact that the beads stuck and the missionary didn't. Between 1722 and 1800, the missionaries physically abandoned the Huichol, basically leaving them to their own means. Still to this day, they communicate with their gods through symbols. So as we go along today, we're going to explain what some of the symbols mean, so you have a little bit more insight into how these people think. Thank you.
It's a free tour. You have to applaud for everything. Okay. The reason we're here, obviously, is to see this sculpture and hear the artist who did it talk about it. You can follow your diagrams because you're not going to be able to see everything he's mentioning on the other side. And at the end, we'll take a quick spin around it. But at any rate, this is called the Millennium. It's done by an artist who signs his work Mathis Lidice. However, that's an artistic nom de plume, and we know him locally as Fernando Baños, originally from Oaxaca, but a long-term Puerto Vallarta resident, a man of many hats, a pioneer restaurateur, president of the Restaurant Association, a civic official, including director of culture, and in addition to being an artist throughout most of this, also a professor of history and philosophy, of which he is now semi-retired. I think as he starts talking about this that you're going to feel that it's a little bit of a history lesson also. Let's have a big hand, please, for Mathis Lidice.
Good morning. Well, at first I would like to thank Gary Thompson for inviting me to your street tour, for sharing the ideas I have when I conceived this piece. Taking into consideration that the song is very heavy, we are at the same latitude of the north of Africa, I will try to be as brief as possible. The first question is why this sculpture is here. The reason was that Puerto Vallarta decided to commemorate the beginning of the new millennium. As far as I know, it was the only beach resort.
Now, Mr. Lidice was very articulate, as you can hear, and he took lots of time explaining the concept of his creation, discussed the engineering feat that actually went into creating this sculpture, because not only is it a work of art, but we found it was an engineering feat as well. The problem with the interview, with listening to it, though, is it didn't make really good audio with the combination of the waves and the wind, and Mr. Lidice's accent. It was very difficult to hear it. So what I suggest you do is get yourself on this tour and hear for yourself what went into the putting together of this beautiful, beautiful sculpture, this first sculpture that we saw on the tour. I actually left many sculptures off of this podcast, and that's because there just wasn't enough time. Let's face it, this was like a 3-hour tour, and it just makes it really difficult to cram all of that stuff into a reasonably length podcast, you know? So there were also times also when the audio was really, really affected by the background noise of the wind and of the high surf. And, well, I had to leave a lot of audio on the cutting room floor, so to speak. It's unusual to have such high waves in Puerto Vallarta, but this particular Tuesday morning, that's what we had. Now, back to the Malecon.
Okay, we've got very loud waves today, so I'm going to need all of you to move over here a little bit. You're fine. Stay where you are. Kind of everybody be in front of that block curve view. Be with your elbow and do whatever you want. Okay, we've got a huge friggin' group here. You're very nice, but you walk slow. That's my main... What I need is you to think of yourselves as a giant organic mass. Think centipede. We got more than 100 feet here, and we got more than 100 ears. So try to cooperate. I'm too nice a person to have to end this day feeling like I've been herding cats for 2 hours. Well, maybe I'm not that nice, but I still don't want to feel like I've been herding cats. Okay, our first sculpture, Origin and Destiny, by a local artist, Pedro Tello, a man of modest means. He first got approval to do this installation 12 years before he was able to raise the money to cast the pieces. He thought it would be an installation of 8 sculptures and 1 observer. Each observer was part of the piece in his mind, so it was a 9-piece installation. He was able to cast 5 with a lot of fundraising. The 5th one was over there in the corner where you can see some bolts. It was a couple of concentric circles, half circles. You push the inner one and it would be kinetic and go back and forth for quite a while. It developed a crack, and the city took it away to fix it 2.5 years ago. I'm not sure when we'll get it back, but as Mathis Lidice mentioned, there are funds in progress right now to restore some of the sculptures, and we're hoping that that will happen. At any rate, the Malecon was rebuilt in the spring of 2011. By the fall, they finished the pavement, but they were still putting in landscaping and the sculptures as they were being refinished. one of the reasons the Malecon was rebuilt is because funds were available from the federal and state governments, because the 16th running of the Pan American Games were happening in nearby Guadalajara, and there were 5 ocean-related events here. So they let people start walking on it before everything was installed. And it became apparent to the artist that the city was going to put something else here and renege on his long-term commitment 12 years before to have his pieces here. Our mayors are only in office for 3 years. That was a lot of continuity to expect. And we have a history of changing parties frequently in terms of the mayors. At any rate, his reaction was he went over and he chained himself to that railing, called the local media, which came in significant others. There was a huge public outcry on his behalf, and the city decided that this would be a uniquely wonderful, perfect, charming place to put the sculpture. Go figure. Okay, what does it mean? Well, I've read the 7-page in Spanish version that the artist wrote, but really, art's supposed to mean what it means to you. Not even what it means to the artist necessarily, and certainly not what it means to me. But what I was able to interpret, and my, my Spanish is kind of like that bird doo-doo we were talking about. At any rate, it's about time. Think of the title, Origin and Destiny, Birth to Death. Look at how everything is twisted, stretched, warped, fragmented like the canoe behind you. I think we're talking about the mysteries of time, dimensions of which we suspect but can't prove, but there are physicists who theorize that when the Big Bang happened, time not only went the direction we've been experiencing, and it went the other way, which is the way I felt this morning when I woke up and had my first coffee. Time was going way the other way. At any rate, here we are. So it means what you want it to mean, but that is probably what he had in mind.
Now, Gary also mixed in some great stories as well. This one about Elizabeth Taylor and John Huston and the making of the Night of the Iguana. That was a great little story. We're going to hear it in just a minute. But he finishes that, and then he continues to tell the story of the sculpture of the couple sitting on a bench. And that sculpture is named Nostalgia by a Mexican artist, Ramírez Barquet. And it's a really touching story that you should hear. And when you do, you'll understand the meaning of the title of this particular bronze, Nostalgia.
She wasn't in the movie, but she was down here to be with him, and in my opinion, keep an eye on him, because Ava Gardner, Deborah Kerr, and Sue Lyons were also in the cast. Sue Lyons' previous movie had been Lolita, so you go figure it. At any rate, she was here, and there were a lot of other luminaries, Tennessee Williams, the playwright, John Huston himself, his acting children, Angelica and Danny, and also a number of other Hollywood luminaries came for the fun of it. And everybody was getting along great, but John Huston realized this probably didn't sell newspapers or movie tickets. So he started rumors that there had been big barroom brawls, death threats, romantic trysts, menages, everything, toi, etc. And when he thought the rumors had circulated enough, he called a press conference. And he started off by saying, "I know you've been hearing rumors." He kind of talked like that. He did. I knew it. I had lunch with him. At any rate, he said, "I think I have the perfect solution. Today I am giving 6 gold-plated, loaded Derringer pistols to the 6 leading members of the cast. I assume they will all work everything out in their own way. Thank you all for coming." End of press conference. So more press came. We became a leading jet set resort, jet set destination, and morphed into, or evolved into being the mega resort we are now. leaving that thought and jumping back to the sculpture, we're going to jump up to 1972 from 1960, 61. Nellie was divorced, owning restaurants and boutiques, and on the day before Mother's Day, flew to Mexico City to see her mom. Ramis was living there close to his, and at that time in the San Angel area, there was a flower market that would hold a few hundred people. On the day before Mother's Day, you can imagine it was packed to the gills. You could barely see 10 feet. And under those conditions, they walked around the corner and bumped into each other, literally, after 27 years of absolutely no contact. They were overwhelmed. They went to a coffee shop, they exchanged info, and Rami started flying here to see her and to date her. And after over a year of that, he'd been having dinner at a landmark restaurant called Carlos O'Brien's, now Senor Frog's, a little less landmark. At any rate, after dinner, they walked down the Malecon a ways, looking at the sunset, and they came back and they sat on a bench about 90 feet behind me, and they were watching people walk by, and they saw that a lot of them were very young. Some of them appeared to be teenagers, and some of those were wearing wedding bands that they could see. It caused them to start talking nostalgically about what would have happened to them if they in fact had been able to get married as teenagers as they once had wanted to. Ramis, who was a fairly shy and timid man, had been thinking about proposing, but Nellie is still about to turn 93 in a few months, the triple Leo antithesis of shy and timid. So he was a little intimidated, but he became totally inspired during that nostalgic moment, and he, thank you, that's okay. He decided he would go back to Mexico City, find the perfect ring, come back as soon as he could, and try to get Nellie on the perfect spot at the perfect moment, and he would propose. And if she said yes, which she did 40-some years ago, he would then try to create a little sculpture about this high, portraying them sitting on that bench, having that nostalgic thought. And if and when he could, which turned out to be 1984, he would install the sculpture close to where the bench had been, and they were having that moment. Any questions?
Great story.
Thanks. Well, you know, I got a headache, but on a good day, I've made people cry. I almost got you, but I think a lot of these other folks are, you know, emotional anorexics. You're deficient. Okay, I'm kidding. You're all wonderful. One of the changes they made with the new Malecon is they moved each sculpture so it would be at the end of the intersecting streets. So as you ride or walk through town, hopefully not drive, and look at the ocean, you see a sculpture framed by the building with the ocean behind you. One of a good idea. Any questions? Okay, let's follow Kevin, please.
In this next part of the recording, Gary told us about Hurricane Kenna and told us about what was the result of the hurricane and how it affected some of the sculptures. In particular, he told us about the sculpture Searching for Reason. It's the one with the ladder and the two kids climbing this ladder. And it has the mom at the bottom of the ladder kind of encouraging the kids below. So check out this story.
The ladder itself is iron, it's not bronze. The two figures on it are, and the big figure that I like to call the encouraging mother figure is also bronze. The latter part was not affected by Hurricane Kenna, even though I've seen photos with rogue waves blowing, going over the top of the ladder. The bottom one was lifted by the surge and deposited face down in the street, probably a natural inclination, back in front of the other sculptures that we just saw on the street in between the restaurant and the sculptures. Because Hurricane Kenna happened on October 25th, it didn't leave a lot of time before Christmas and New Year's. They have hundreds of thousands of people walking on the Malecon. They were hard pressed to get it done in time, which they did, but they started out by trying to clear a lane to use to haul off rubble and bring in building materials. During that first day, a front-end loader picked up Big Bertha here and put her in the bottom of the big dump truck. The front-end loader's not really sitting up on the bottom, piled debris on top of her. And however, the truck driver remembered what he had, and he went to a designated area and picked it up enough to dump the debris, but not the bronze. He went a quarter of a mile away, and when nobody was looking, dumped it in the brush, came back that night with friends in a truck, and stole it. They went to a scrap metal dealer, remembering it's mostly copper, trying to sell it. And the metal dealer called the cops. They came, but not quite in time. The people escaped. And when they were finally caught, a couple of weeks later, although this was appraised at $85,000, they were trying to sell it for $100 on the street. Now that would have been a pretty good buy for you, man. Did you raise your name? Yeah. Would have been a very good buy for you, but what are you going to do? You know, you buy it for $100. You're going to have to build a special room, a secret room, a secret door, and then if you do show it to anybody, you're going to think, well, they talk. You might think you might have to kill them. Only safe bet. And then what are you going to do with the body? You don't have a backyard. You're going to be on Craigslist every day trying to get a good deal on a wood chipper. Cargo. The sculpture itself is called The Boy on the Seahorse, the Caminito del Mar, and it's done by Rafael Zamaripa of Guadalajara. And this was installed in 1976. Raphael was an artistic prodigy. He was admitted to the art department of the University of Guadalajara when he was only 13. He'd obtained a bachelor's degree when he was 17. At 18, he won the National Sculpture Award for the whole country of Mexico. And at 19, he was commissioned by the city of Vallarta to do a somewhat smaller version on Los Muertos Beach, about 1.5 miles south of it. After a couple of years, that was 1970 that went in. After a couple of years, there was a storm and knocked it off with a rocky outcropping where it was mounted. And we were told that it had been taken to the foundry for repairs, and then we were told that it had been stolen or lost. The artist had segued into becoming the choreographer and lead dancer of a folkloric group at the University of Mexico in Mexico City, and was traveling the world on tours and didn't even realize it was missing for quite a while. And once he did, it took him years to track it down, where he found it hidden under bags of cement in the basement of a home owned by a former public official. I think the idea was that the cement was going to be used to make that private room this lady was going to need. At any rate, it was repatriated to where it still is now on Los Muertos Beach. Some local businessmen raised the money to commission this piece, which was installed in front of that big white building down there originally in 1976. He was told that he had a broad franchise as to what he did, but it had to have a marine theme. He said he chose what he did because as a young boy he had had fantasies of living under the sea and being a cowboy riding a seahorse. And he gave the boy a sombrero of the mariachis, which are native to our state, along with tequila, and I would say mutually inspiring and highly copacetic. Okay, any questions? Do you want to talk about the sun that we're stepping on over here?
This little symbol here represents the sun. Notice the peyote in the middle. It's the peyote in the middle that gives the sun wisdom. The sun's rays, however, are represented by those prayer arrows that we speak of. So when the sun's rays touch the ground, that's when the corona would grow up.
Okay, we're going to walk to the dolphins, please. Okay, I needed you up close. No seating, no shade, because I wanted you to see these striations, part of the sculpture. Bronze is an alloy of a few different metals, but mostly copper. And when it comes out of the kiln, it's a golden color. It's unique in that you can heat it to high temperatures and apply different acids or minerals, and it'll turn different colors, which actually become metallurgical changes on the surface. However, thousands, sorry if I spit on you, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people sitting on something, rubbing it, will act like sandpaper. Take it back to the basic goal. This is considered to be the part of the beauty of outdoor sculptures. And most people, most artists, with pieces on the Malecon, wanted people to climb all over them and enjoy them and interact with them. Mathis Lidice from the Millennium didn't feel that way. And he has had pieces stolen and broken when people have climbed it. You notice there was a moat. You never put crocodiles or sharks in it, but it is a moat. And before Hurricane Kenna, there was actually a glass and stainless steel fence around the edge of it, keeping people out. He saw that this was happening and that the texture was wearing down, so he went to the city and said, you got to help the artist out and put a fence around it to protect it. And they said, well, that's not a bad idea, but we have no money. Later, you're going to see a sculpture of two dancers by Jim DeMetro, and you're going to meet him at the end of the tour, so don't punk out and quit. At any rate, he went with the same request, and they once again said, nice idea, no money. So he spent $1,500 of his own and had a stainless steel fence created that you can climb over, but you know you're not supposed to, and that solves most of the problem. You don't want to obscure the view of it, and when possible, you don't want to, interrupt the interaction with it, but it's a double-edged sword. Enjoy it, but don't break it. And I will bring that up a little bit later, because there have been a few things broken. Okay, this is called the Unicorn of Good Luck and Good Fortune by Anibal Gutierrez, a man who has won regional awards not only for sculpture but also jewelry design. And I think that you could visualize this as being an attractive pendant with the scale down. The unicorn throughout history has been this creature attributed with good luck and good fortune, kind of like a leprechaun. Marco Polo, in his famous journal, wrote that he had seen one in Africa and he thought it was really, really ugly. But it turned out that what he had seen was the single-horned rhinoceros, which, unless you're a mama rhinoceros, you may not think is overly cute. Usually it's portrayed as a white stallion horse with a single horn coming out of its neck. Any questions? Okay, this is called Trident and Nereid. Trident being the nickname of Poseidon, the god of the seas and oceans in Greek mythology. You might say morphed into becoming Neptune in Roman mythology. Nereids, obviously mermaids, but special types. According to Greek mythology, there were 50 in the Mediterranean, and the head Nereid was the significant other of Poseidon. I think when you're the god of the seas, you don't need paperwork. At any rate, the original Trident spear was bronze, stolen many years ago by an asshole souvenir hunter. This is one of the few examples where a government body actually paid for a sculpture. In this particular case, our state government of Jalisco that we're part of commissioned a Mexico City artist, Carlos Espino, who has monumental pieces throughout the country, to do two of these. One for Puerto Vallarta and one for Barra de Navidad, a resort town on the beach south of the very southern extreme of our state. Named because a Spanish galleon ran aground on a sandbar in front of the town on Christmas Day. Barra de Navidad. Little known fact, you got it here. Thank you. Okay, we talked about how rubbing the bronze makes it shiny gold. Do we have any theories as to what got shiny here first? If you're thinking fins, you're delusional. Okay, no questions? Follow Kevin, please. Take note that one of the tentacles of the octopus seems to have a stain there. That's where it broke off and had to be re-welded. This artist anticipated people climbing all over him, and you notice all the shiny spots from where they have. And he wanted that, but he didn't anticipate that a 280-pound man would dangle from the tentacle while scratching his armpit, portraying an ape while his wife made a video. It broke. It requires a special kind of welding, heliart. It didn't, nobody got around to it for a long time. And the only way to do it perfectly is to sand down the whole sculpture after you weld it and then give it a whole new patina. They didn't do that, and hence you can see the stain. Enjoy them, but don't break. This is called the Rotunda del Mar, the Plaza of the Sea, by Alejandro Colunga. Can all you folks hear me back here?
Yes, barely.
You still want to? Good. Because I'm not done yet. Okay, Alejandro is another Guadalajara artist, but one that is quite well known internationally, featured in a lot of museum shows around the world on Mexican and Latin American art, in many books. Currently 68, living in Paris with a 20-year-old girl. I would call him an active artist. He would be known as a magical realist, which also Pedro Tello and Jonas Gutierrez would be considered. And you might say that magical realism is a kind of a Latin American take on surrealism, also encompassing literature. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Jorge Amado were considered to be magical realism authors. Fernando Botero of Colombia, the one who did the really big people, probably the most famous sculptor and painter of magical realism. He says his people are not fat. They are volumetrically proportionate to a large world. So if you're thinking about dieting, you might want to just reconsider and hang out with bigger people. God, I feel small. Just saying. Okay, 8 major figures, 8 minor figures. The minor ones, monos, are considered by the artist to be children in witness and testimony of the others. Of particular interest are the feet. There is nothing original under this sun, and although this artist has done this a lot since the beginning, it's also noticeable when you look in the work of Max Ernst in the 20s and 30s. He did some similar things. This artist, Alejandro Colunga, ran away actually and joined the circus and has always been fascinated with sorcerers and magicians, and Harry Potter would be right up his line. This big piece with the squid-like figure didn't make it for the formal inauguration because thieves had broken into the studio where it had been worked on, and in trying to carry it out, dropped it, broke it, ran away. So it had to be repaired. Any questions? Okay, let's follow Kevin, please. Boy, are you going to have fun.
Especially excited to see Tito.
Okay, this is the third piece by Ramis Barquet. It's called El Juglar, which means a minstrel. In this case, obviously a flautist. But Ramis, for several years, lived in this building, and he would come down the steps and often be greeted by a pile of garbage. So he became inspired. The lower part of town is called El Centro on the ocean level, and up about 100 yards is another level called El Cerro, another 3 or 4 blocks wide. And he thought that where the two streets met at the bottom, if he could do something beautiful, it would maybe inspire the neighbors in the city to do something similar on the other installations, or the other intersections, rather. He thought this was especially important, this particular one, because if you look towards the ocean, you see the very top of a lighthouse. And 100 yards behind me is another one. The original ship traffic into town would line up the two lights. Now they can pick any one of several 20 to 30-story condo towers. My third political statement today. Okay. he invited a retired friend who's now unfortunately deceased, Arquitecto Rafael Mijares, to design the little plaza. Rafael was the co-designer of the world-famous National Anthropological Museum in Mexico City, which has won awards not only for its contents and its museography, but also for the building itself. And he came up with the semicircular design using cobblestones as the surface. And as you were walking here, you may have noticed that the sidewalks had the curvy patterns with little pebbles. The curves represent the waves of the ocean, and the pebbles represent the cobblestone streets. And if you see it, you know that there's going to be a ramp at the end, which is another thing they initiated when they did the design. Any questions? Well, you may have noticed that most of these intersections now are decorated with landscaping or a fountain or something, so his wish came true. All right, we're going to walk a couple blocks now to Galeria Pacifico. We're going to cross a dangerous street one time, so if you ever walked fast, when I throw myself in front of the traffic, that would be the time to do it. So at any rate, you've been great. Don't quit now. We're almost done.
Thanks. Thanks.
Today we are with Gary Thompson, and he is the owner and director of Galeria Pacifico here in Puerto Vallarta, and he is the guy that we just listened to on the Malecon, giving us a tour of all of those great sculptures. And Gary, thank you very much for joining me here today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for showing an interest.
Well, the first time I saw you in a YouTube video, and you were doing the tour of the Malecon and of all the artwork there, and I thought, okay, this is going to be the interview that I want to have. I want to talk to you, Gary. So, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and what was the path that led you to Puerto Vallarta.
There were a couple of inspirations. Number one, I grew up in a rainy, cloudy place, Seattle and Tacoma area, Bellingham. Number two, when I was about 10 or 11, a classmate brought his dad with a slideshow on the first day of school of a 2-month car trip they did throughout Mexico, and they'd hit all the sites, and it fascinated me. So that's when I first started getting interest in Mexico, when I was around 11.
That's great. You got interest in Mexico at 11, but tell us about your path to get to Puerto Vallarta.
Well, I was a lieutenant in the Army in Vietnam in a combat photography unit, and when I got out, I hung out in the Seattle area, but I started visiting relatives and friends up in Bellingham, and ended up moving there. I'd actually gone to grade school there a couple of years and had relatives, as I mentioned. And my first job was being a veterans counselor in a experimental program funded by the feds, administrated by the state, and actually overseen by a university in our town of Bellingham. So after a year of being a counselor and the assistant director, I lined myself up, 2 clients and a friend, to collect GI Bill in Guadalajara at an institute. Huh. And at the end of the term, one of them ended up in Puerto Vallarta and Jalapa, sent a postcard. I went there to visit my friend and fell in love with the area.
When you got here, was art your passion at the time?
I'd been trying to open an art gallery in Bellingham, which is kind of a tourist area for Canadians and Americans, and because it was in between the San Juan Islands and the North Cascade Mountain Range, kind of a national or international attraction as well. And so I'd planned on trying to open up something there. It fell through, and I kind of stumbled into it down here.
Okay. And, well, everybody who is listening to the show needs to come on by and check out the studio. It's beautiful. It's right in Centro.
Yeah, we're only about 75 feet from the Malecon, and thank you for your compliments. We're proud of our artist and feel lucky to be able to represent such talented people.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And what you do as far as this tour that you give, I don't know if I caught any of this in my recording while I was on the Malecon, but tell us what you at the end, you work with the library, don't you? And you help them out?
Yeah, well, one of my primary artists, Ramis Barquette, he died at the age of 90 in 2010. Several years before, had donated a sculpture to the library showing a boy reading a book, a homeless child, tattered clothes, and a tattered book bag. And it was called A Boy, a Book, a Future. And kind of symbolized the function of the library in that with its facility available to the child, he could raise himself intellectually, culturally, and economically. And that got my involvement going with them. And for a while I did studio tours with vans. People moved, a couple died. And in the interim time, enough sculptures were placed in the Malecon that I decided to try a walking tour to include them. And Ramis was always here at the end to meet the people, and he was a favorite part of the tour. And when he passed on, a year or two later, Jim DeMetro joined us, who did the Vallarta Dancers sculpture, the woman washing clothes, the Burrow Project, and the new sculpture of Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor at the Boutique Hotel that's at their former home, Casa Kimberly.
Yes, and we had a chance to listen to Jim. Just after the tour, we came back to the studio here, and were treated to some refreshments and had a chance to listen to quite a prolific artist as far as Puerto Vallarta is concerned. I mean, he's got 3 sculptures.
Actually 4 now, and he has like about 56 in North America in total, and just received a commission to do an 8-foot piece in downtown Vancouver, Washington, which is just across the Columbia River from Portland.
Yes. Well, that's fantastic. And all right, so tell us a little bit about art in Puerto Vallarta. You have the art walk that happens. When does that go on?
That's from the last Wednesday of October to the last Wednesday of May, every week from 6 to 10 p.m.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that. How does that work?
Well, it's a self-guided tour. We print up about 50,000 brochures that have a map in the middle. Each gallery has a page. And the people just use the map and start, end, or finish wherever they want. Some go to all the galleries, some go to one, some go to half. And it's entirely dependent upon their interest and energy level.
Of course, yeah, because this is Puerto Vallarta, and there are hills. It's a little hilly, but actually in this area, this part is not as hilly as most.
The gallery section is all pretty much, just slightly above sea level, like maybe 5 feet.
Okay, so you, those of you,
pretty level.
Okay, so those of you who have mobility issues, it should be okay to be able to take this art walk.
Yeah, on the edge, going up to El Cerro, there's about 100 steps going up to that part of town, so that is something to consider.
So the people that are going on this art walk, they are usually treated to something other than art, too, aren't they, when they get to these galleries? Some of them have wine and cheese or something like that?
They pretty much all have beverages. Some have food. Some might even have music, live music. It varies with the gallery, and it also varies as to whether they're having a solo show, inauguration of a solo show, or they're getting ready to finish a show or whatever. But there's something special offered by pretty much everybody.
Okay, so that's just a little extra added bonus, and on top of that, you get to take a look at some great art and maybe even buy some too. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, it never happens quite as often as we wish, but it would be wonderful.
Okay, bring your pesos, your American dollars, your charge cards, all that good stuff. Just make sure that you check out Galeria Pacifico. And when you are in Puerto Vallarta, now tell me this: when you give those tours of the Malecon, what's your schedule like? When do you do that?
Well, this is the 11th year that we've done it every Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning from the middle of November to the middle of April. And it's a free tour. I tell people that means they can't ask for a refund if they don't like it. But basically, we suggest that they consider giving a donation to the library, and usually the director or one of the board members of the director on the board is there to talk about the library to the people, and at the end of the tour, accept their donations. And we usually raise a few $1,000s every year. And this particular week, very important because on Thursday night, starting at 6 for cocktails and at 7 for the auction, they have their annual fundraiser where they auction off art and donations, stays in different hotels and restaurants and things like that, and gather up a good deal of the money they need to operate for the year. They're a nonprofit, and they get, it varies from nothing to practically nothing in terms of government support.
Yes, that's too bad.
So the donations keep them going. And I'll be the assistant director or co-auctioneer at the auction. I do it in English, and a member of the board called Maria Jose Zoria does it in Spanish.
Excellent. And where is that library?
It's on one of the main streets in town, Francisco Villa. It starts kind of near the Sheraton and goes all the way to Pitial. And it's just like one street away from Costco, which pretty much every expat in Puerto Vallarta can tell you where to find that.
Of course they can. Well, I have to say, Gary, it's been a pleasure meeting you. That tour was fantastic, and if you are in town during the period when Gary is giving those tours, I really, really highly suggest that you give it a try. And again, those are on Tuesdays. He starts at the top of the Malecon and basically works his way down.
Yeah, we start at the very north end, next to the Hotel Rosita, which actually provides chairs next to the Millennium sculpture, which is back by their pool and right at the beach.
Yeah, and I think that's an incredible sculpture. That is just fascinating.
Yeah, and just sitting there, people sometimes see a whale or a dolphin or,
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, that is not a life-changing moment, but one that will be a memory for many years.
Well,
I'm sure.
even without the wildlife, the view is incredible.
Yeah, that's absolutely for sure. Gary Thompson, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, and thanks for showing up.
Absolutely. Wow. Gary Thompson is a really, really nice and truly funny guy. Now, I recorded this interview at the end of January, so if you're interested in that yearly auction that he talked about that benefits the library, well, I've got bad news for you. It's already happened. But if you want to learn more about it for next year, I'll have a link to it in my show notes at www.puertovallartatravelshow.com. And when you come to this free tour, please make sure you bring some pesos to donate to this fine cause. Don't forget that for sure. Gary really puts his heart and soul into these tours, so help out his favorite charity, will you? The library in Puerto Vallarta. And while you're in Puerto Vallarta, make sure that if you can't make that sculpture tour, at least stop by the Galeria Pacifico and stick your head in and say hi to Gary Thompson. Tell him that you heard about him on the Puerto Vallarta Travel Show. And by the way, the artists that he shows in his gallery are fantastic. So don't just stick your head in. Put your whole body inside. Walk around. Maybe you'll find something you really love. Well, looks like we're through for today. I hope that you enjoyed your tour of these Malecon sculptures. next week, stay tuned for more on-the-ground reports from Puerto Vallarta. Remember, this is an interactive show where I depend on your questions and your suggestions about all things Puerto Vallarta. If you think of something that I should be talking about, well, please reach out to me and click on that Contact Us tab and send us your message. Remember, if you're considering booking any type of tour, by the way, while you're here in Puerto Vallarta, you must go to vallartainfo.com, that's JR's website, and reserve your tour through him right from his website. Remember, it's a value-for-value proposition here. His experience and his on-the-ground knowledge of everything Puerto Vallarta in exchange for your making a purchase of a tour that you do anyway, right? You're just doing it through him as a way of saying thank you. Thanks, JR, for being our guide. It costs no more than if you were going to be using someone else, so just do it, really. And when you do take one of those tours, email me about your experiences. Maybe you can come on board and share with others what you liked or didn't like about the tour. Again, contact me by clicking on the Contact Us tab and sending off a message. And once again, if you like this podcast, please take the time and subscribe and give us a good review on iTunes if you would. That way we could get more and more people the word about the magic of this place, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So, thanks to Gary Thompson of the Galeria Pacifico. Check out the photos on my show notes over at www.puertovallartatravelshow.com. And thanks to all of you for listening all the way through this episode of the Puerto Vallarta Travel Show. This is Barry Kessler signing off with a wish for you to slow down, be kind, and live the Vallarta lifestyle. Nos vemos, amigos.
Samba de Puerto Vallarta, noche de arrullo en el mar. Samba de Puerto Vallarta, noche de amor junto al mar. Solo camino eterno por la playa, me encuentro junto al río cuando todo está en calma. Pronto cae la noche, brillas Puerto Vallarta, samba de Puerto Vallarta, noche de arrullo en el mar. Samba de Puerto Vallarta.